What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Empowered Athlete Podcast. It's your host, Maddie Boss, and today we have a very special guest, Miss Nikki Norenberg Klaus. Do you go by your full name?
Sometimes, depends. I'm married, but I keep my maiden name for just ease and business purposes, but you can call me either or.
Yeah, awesome. We actually met many years ago. We were talking right before kind of recording the beginning of this episode, back at a basically business workshop retreat in California. And we connected there, and I've been following her ever since. And I've really been loving the content she's been putting out and what she's evolved into. So I reached out to see if she'd like to share the work that she does with my listeners, because it's something that I talk about, and to hear a different perspective is something I'm always signing up for to share with you guys. So in this episode, we're going to be diving into self-discovery, intuition, and discovering your gifts, which is something I'm so excited to dive into. And she's going to share her story and what she does with her clients and that whole process. A little bit about Nikki. So she's currently based in Austin, Texas. She's a self-discovery coach, intuitive yoga and meditation teacher, and speaker. She helps guide people to discover the truest and brightest version of themselves and to bring their big visions to life. She has partnered with renowned fitness and lifestyle brands such as Alo Yoga, Carbon 38, Soho House, Beachbody, and Forward Female, as well as currently serves as the Austin area ambassador for the FP movement. She, inspired by her own life's journey, Nikki is committed to providing individuals, groups, and organizations the tools and clarity they need to confidently express and share their unique gifts and ideas with the world. And her mission is to help everyone embrace their talents, wisdom, and desires so that they can shine brightly and inspire others to do the same. So she is a light being in herself, and it makes perfect sense that this is the role that she is now in. And so without further ado, welcome, Nikki, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it so much.
Yes. So as always, I love to start with your story and a little bit about what your life journey has been so far that has led you to do what you do today. And I'd love to even know that little transitionary period from when we first met. I don't know if you were quite in this work as deeply, or maybe you were just beginning. It was the budding stages. So I'd love to know a little bit about that process as well.
Yeah, of course. So to kind of start from a foundation, I grew up in the Midwest, in Minnesota specifically. And I had really, from a very, very young age, had this inner feeling and knowing that I was meant to do something different. I had, a lot of corporate influences around me and a lot of, some cookie cutter style living. And I knew that my soul just really wanted to be big and bright, but I didn't really know what that meant at a young age. Right. And so, as we progress in life, it becomes very easy to follow the status quo of what's around you because, we're human beings. We want to belong, we want to fit in. And when that's all that we're really kind of being guided and fed, it's what we follow. And so I continued to follow on the path that brought me into corporate America, where, as a little girl, I was like, I'll never sit in a cubicle, but there I was, punching the clock, in my little cell. And I just kind of had this moment of how did I end up here, essentially? But I had really built my life around what I thought I should do, I kind of call it my should life. It was everything that was accepted. And I just had this really profound moment in the mirror. And I feel a lot of us have these moments throughout life that are very common moments that all of a sudden hit very differently, something has shifted. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and just not recognizing who I was. I was I have become a shell of myself. I don't even recognize who I am anymore. And I heard this little whisper of that inner child voice saying where'd you go? Come on, we're still back here. We still want to shine and do things different. And you're doing the same of everyone else. And it was that once that was awakened in me, I couldn't unhear that. right? And so I have been a dancer my entire life. And since that was still a deep passion of mine, I thought, okay, there's my ticket out of here. So I moved my life across the country, leaving a very serious boyfriend, an entire built up life behind. And in that jump of just like transitioning from Minnesota to LA, I mean, that alone was life changing, but it really forced me to understand myself, because I very quickly also realized that dance wasn't the thing. So I was like, okay, well, I'm in LA for a reason that isn't me pursuing dance. So like, what the hell am I here for? And it was that kind of sobering moment where I realized, all right, we got to pull up the bootstraps and really understand, like, who are you? Like, who am I really meant to become? And I, went on this self-discovery journey that, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot deeper, but it involved a lot of introspection. It involved a lot of spending time alone, doing experiences, comfort zone stretching. The list goes on, but I slowly started to feel myself return. And it was over time that the more I started to hear myself, the quicker I could pick up on it, and the more like rush and the faster the momentum started to build, because I felt like my soul was like, there you go, there you are, like, let's keep going. And it was in this process that I just felt like I had hit this like gold mine. I was like, I know so many people in my life that are so unsatisfied with their jobs or their life, just like alone, like they just feel like this mundane energy, and they all know they're meant for more. Yeah. And so I started just kind of talking about it and teaching about it and welcoming friends and like acquaintances into just these kind of awakenings that I was having. And it eventually evolved itself into a business. I never really like started it thinking I'm going to start a business. I more so thought, I got to tell people about this. Like, I got to teach people about this process. And it just evolved into me really supporting and coaching people one-on-one. A lot of it started in like the career change community. And it was really more like, let's self-discover to really connect into your purpose and who you are. And then we can start to see how can that be expressed in the way that you want to like pursue career or hobbies.
Yeah.
And through all of that, I've been doing, for the last 4 years, I've been coaching people one-on-one and in group. But inside of that journey as well, I also had this like deep awakening with my intuition, which is one of the greatest, self-discovery tools or access points of all. Intuition is something that we all have, but if we don't have space to hear or receive it, it doesn't work with us. And so I gave myself like this deep year of study and mentorship and practice. And I awakened my intuition in a way that I had never experienced before, which was just a whole new layer of self and of support to others. So I kind of had evolved some of my work into reading the chakras and really being able to support people from this like deeper layer of introspection from a more energetic and intuitive standpoint. And beyond all of that, I've always been like a fitness person. Like, I've taught dance for 10 years. I've taught yoga for the last 5. I'm in the process of creating my own movement modality. So I'm like totally a multi-hyphenate, multi-passionate gal. Like, I've got my hands in a lot of things, but I would say everything that I do comes back to really, really knowing yourself. So self-discovery.
So good. One of the things that really stood out to what you just said right now was this idea of going in and creating this deep inner clarity before going outward. And I feel like so many of us, even if we do desire like a career change, we just try all of these different external things and like, oh, maybe I'll try this because like so-and-so said so, or this seems to work for that person, or it is a skill that I like and I'll try it, but there still isn't like that deep self-discovery, like who am I process, and there's still this surface level searching for different things. And then as always, whenever we work on the surface level, it's not deep rooted foundation for transformational sustainable change. So then there's still this like lack of fulfillment that gets carried over into all of these things. So I just really love that your process is to like really go deep, understand who you are. And then from there, you'll gain clarity on how it needs to be expressed.
Yeah, 100%. And I love the way you describe that, because really, I mean, like, what I know to be true about my self-discovery is like everything is rooted from a few things in our life, like from our truth, right? And it's just like, when we know where everything is coming from, it bleeds into the way that we show up. It bleeds into the decisions we make. It bleeds into our confidence. Like every single thing that we desire, that we struggle with, that we yearn for, is all rooted from these deeper places, instead of, like you said, kind of that, and I don't want to call it like Band-Aid approach, but kind of like the surface searching, where it's kind of like always externally going outside of the self, but really it's this like pause to know where it's coming from and why.
Yeah. And I think that could be really scary for many, many, many reasons, because self-discovery can be a very scary, although empowering process. But sometimes one of the things I really believe, which it goes against our cultural conditioning, is that that process of self-discovery often, like you said, requires like this introspection, which means a slowing down, a pause.
Yeah.
That's not just like pausing in the moment. It might be like pausing aspects of your life, you know, to be able to create that clarity. And that could be really scary, because there could be these scarcity fears of like, I have to keep going to like make the money, and like, but the true gold is like giving yourself that space and that slow down period, so that you can kind of get into that alignment. And when we slow down and get into alignment, it actually increases that streamlined process. So we'll actually go further faster, because we're in that alignment where there's no restriction and resistance and ickiness, where we're trudging through it, and it's better energy flow. And whereas like when we just keep pushing, it's requiring more of us, more energy, and it's, the outcome isn't even fulfilling, because it's not in alignment.
Totally. And I think, you know, you say slowing down, and like, that's such a foundational, rudimentary thing across all things in life, right? Is creating space, because when we have space, we actually become the witness. And in any sort of personal work, whether it be therapy, intuition, self-discovery, anxiety, like anything, becoming the witness removes you from being an automatic responder. It allows for you to see from this kind of like bird's eye view what's actually going on, so that you can make a discerned choice. Because like so much too of self-discovery is discernment. It's being able to discern the difference between like something that lights you up and something that drains you. The difference between when you know it's time to let something go, and when you know that you're just hanging on for comfort, right? It's like the discernment process all happens from the seat of the witness, because if we're not in the seat of the witness, we just go off of autopilot. Exactly. And it's really easy to just continue repeating. And so like, if we're people who are like, I am ready to go on the process of self-discovery, there is so much discerning that, to your point, is going to be scary, because you have to make different choices, right? Like my entire life looks so different than it did 7 years ago. You know, the people that I surround myself with, the things that I choose to do on the weekends, like these are all like very different things than I was doing. And it was very uncomfortable to unravel that and to learn, okay, what is it that I want to do? And what is it that I have to let go of? But when you can start to feel into the difference between that kind of like fill or drain, the thing that fills you up so much feels so good. And you start to like hone into that alignment, that you just stay connected and you stay like focused on that North Star, because you know that this is a feeling you want to keep feeling.
Exactly. Yeah. I love that. So for those who might be, you know, complete newbies, I know I talk about it a lot, but just from your perspective, how would you define self-discovery? I know that it can be both like an alluring term and also like elusive at the same time, like not really knowing how to take those first steps. But can you speak more to the process of self-discovery, maybe the way that you view it, and, you know, how would you like define it for the listeners?
Yeah. Self-discovery to me is really understanding yourself in general. And since I am a little bit, not a little bit, a lot of it on the spiritual side, like from a soul perspective, right? And just like understanding who you are sans anyone else. Because yes, of course, we like grow up in culture and in community, and we have a lot of things that we've gravitated or like adapted, or what's the word I want to use here? we've just grasped onto a lot of things over the years that we feel are ours, but they actually may not be.
Yeah.
Right. And so self-discovery is kind of like decluttering the noise, like turning some of that off and really turning up the volume of your internal landscape, which is a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So self-discovery is understanding yourself first and foremost. So it's kind of like the reconnection to self. Who the hell am I? But then also trusting it, because that's like the next layer, right? Is okay, now that I know myself, now I have to actually make choices and do something with it from that place. And I think that self-discovery oftentimes shows up in life when people feel stuck or when people feel lost, whether it be at like the end of a relationship or at the end of like, a career path shifting, but there's usually some sort of agent that brings people into saying like, okay, something feels out of alignment, even if they're not sure how to describe it like that, but something feels off for them to say, I got to come back into me and figure out what actually feels good to me. Because oftentimes it's nothing that anyone else can tell us is right for us, because nobody else knows what's right for us but us, not our parents, not our mentors. Like, we are truly the only people that know what is very, very best for us. And so I think the greatest asset that we have in this entire lifetime is to know ourselves and trust ourselves. Because if we're coming from a place of trust and knowing, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. One of the things that I like to use as kind of like a mantra and a way that I describe self-discovery is knowing who you are and figuring out who you are before the world told you who you needed to be.
100.
One of my favorite like mantras when it comes to self-discovery. Yeah, but I absolutely love that. And when it comes to taking that first step, we kind of mentioned that idea of like creating space. But what would you recommend for people getting into just a self-discovery process, or maybe on those early stages of planting the seeds? What would be the best thing for them to start with?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few different kind of avenues. And I think that since self-discovery is so like multi-layered, I definitely believe that there's not like one lane in self-discovery that's going to bring people home to themselves. Like, it's kind of an exploration of a lot of different things. Definitely coming back to that thing that I mentioned, which is all about like witnessing your energy, what's kind of filling you, what's draining you, really witnessing the difference of when you feel lit up or when you feel like melancholy or empty. But also like recognizing when you're pulled towards something. So many people, I'm like, what lights you up? And they're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with work, but it's this. And I'm like, okay, but there's still something inside of that is true to you, that's pulling on a piece of your soul that wants to be seen and expressed. Right. But the next thing that like, this was one of the biggest like awakenings for me, but is really trying to return back to who you've always been, which is really like, some inner child stuff, but not from a, traumatic exploration, but more of the magic and the gifts, because this is where I believe we connect with all of our gifts, is like remembering who we were as a kid. And I know that like what was that?
Like our essence, like our inner child essence.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that like, there is so much in our youth, because to your point, it's who we are. There's a certain age range. I feel like it's about like 2 to 6, depending on the kid, where we are fully expressed, like our soul is fully expressed. And like kids don't know any different than being themselves at that point in time. Right. And it's like before the world gets their hands on them, but that is like a gold mine from gifts, from expression, and from purpose. And we come into this world whole, and then we kind of just start to like lose ourselves and cover ourselves up with these like other factors, right? These other projections. And so it's, in my belief, like self-discovery is getting back to that essence always. And so just ways that I've done that. And I know that everybody has kind of varying access to this stuff, but finding old photos, finding old videos, talking to family or friends that knew you in that era, and just like really bringing that archetype of yourself alive, right? Just like in any way, shape, or form that you can reconnect to that energy is so incredibly important. And then kind of exploring that from there, because a lot of times when people do that, they're like, oh, I haven't really thought about that for a long time. Or, oh, I actually was like obsessed with art and love to draw. And I was like, and when was the last time that you did anything art related? Oh, 15 years ago. Right. So it's kind of like these moments where you're like, oh, there are other parts of me. Because for me in my journey, I had like started looking through all of these old accolades and things from school. And so many of my teachers said that I had a knack for writing and for community and for support. And at the time I had been in corporate and focusing on dance. And I all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that, about me. And that's kind of when I started being like, I can support people in this. That was the like glue that started bringing my idea together to support people. And honestly, what launched my entire coaching career. So it's these little things that we think are small that are actually massive clues that have been under our nose the entire time.
100%. Yeah, there's this tool that I really like and teach my students called emotional resourcing. And it kind of speaks to what you're saying, whereas like when you feel that thing, or it can be an image that brings this like more higher vibration energy into your body that makes you feel excited and lit up, that we want to follow that. But we can do that with images. So when we like reconnect photos of our inner child, like really connecting to, even if you don't remember the experience itself, like there can be a feeling that image evokes. And then the next step to that, trusting that if it's a positive thing, that like there may be something like that could be a sign or a path to go down to explore a little bit more. Because unfortunately we do shut off a lot of memories as we get to adults because of the negative experiences that we have. But when we can have those images to remind us, I have a few that I always have on my phone, and it just always brings back those feelings. Whenever I want to evoke those feelings, I look at those photos, and it really helps me reconnect with that version of me and like help me stay in that alignment of like, oh yeah, don't lose your sunshine. Like
totally,
this is who you are. And so those really good reminders. And also, like you said, kind of like a little benchmark or those little clues of what might be the path to explore.
So well articulated. And I think too, just like to know, because I know, as we mentioned, like memories can be hard to access for some. I think that children are like the gurus of the world, I believe. And I think that if we have a hard time accessing our essence, it's just getting into the frequency of that like play, of inner child play. So it's like playing laser tag, rolling down a hill, like things that you would in your adult probably normally be like, those are for kids. But like putting yourself into that place, because there is something that may awaken in you that you'll be like, oh, I haven't felt this in a long time. And it just like allows that energy to return in some capacity if it's not accessed by memory.
I love that so much. Absolutely. And so you spoke a little bit to intuition, and I'm on the same page with you 100%, that the intuition speaks in whispers like you had in your own experience, and that I have times as well. It doesn't speak in chaos. That's the mind. So when we are quiet enough, we have the space and stillness. Oftentimes that's when we have access to our intuition. So I'm curious to know, like, if there's any more to the story around how you've come to tune in and listen to your intuition. Maybe what is your daily or weekly or practice when it comes to decision making intuitively, and like how you tune in to make that decision. And in the past, what do you feel was in the way of you being able to really tune in and listen to your intuition? Start leading an intuitive led life.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people actually experience kind of like intuitive phenomenons, I guess, if you will, when they're kids, because again, we're in that like freedom space, or a lot of times people will feel it with animals. Like if you're somebody that had a deep connection with animals, it's because like from a spiritual perspective, they're very open, and you kind of have this like more open channel. And so there were multiple experiences when I was like young, like 7 and 9, that I had these like very intuitive connection points with my cat. It was very strange, but like I woke up one morning and I knew that something was wrong, and I told my mom, and she's like, whatever, you're fine. Anyway, long story short, something was wrong. And I like intuited it, and I knew it without having any explanation as to why, other than knowing. And so that was always something that I held on to. And I think too, when it comes to other people, I've always been able to read energy very well and intuit for other people, more so than I would say for myself at first, which I think a lot of people naturally, because there's not the expectation and the like inner critic judgment happening. But I think like that's kind of what started happening to me in coaching, is I started just witnessing that the things that were coming through me were actually intuitive, right? They were kind of like coming through my intuition and not actually from something that they had shared. So I started to kind of put the pieces together and realize like, oh, there's actually like a greater energy that's trying to work with me. And I know that it's working for other people, but I also like want it to work for me. But I had a mentor and I went through kind of like her certification process to learn her specific methodology. But at the end of the day, intuition is a listening, to your point, right? It's like, it's the difference between the quiet and the chaos, and really being able to discern between those two energies. Because I would say that the voices that we hear are intuition and our inner critic. And the intuition is it's gentle, it's quiet, and it's very neutral, to be honest.
Yeah.
It doesn't really come in with this charge. What comes in with charge is the like chatty inner critic.
Yeah.
You know, it's the difference between, like, this is how I describe it in some of my workshops, is it's like intuition is like the energy of a hang glider where it passes by your view once. And the energy of your inner critic is a roller coaster where we're revisiting information and we're swirling around. And so it's kind of like when you're able to hear and really ask yourself, like, what's the undertone of that energy coming from? Right? And I think the challenging thing about intuition, where people kind of start to spiral, is sometimes we don't want to hear what our intuition says. Is our intuition tells us something that we have to do something with, and we're like, shit. And then we spiral, and then we bring in all of these reasons why not to, when then 5 months down the road, we realize, oh, it was true all along, right? But it's like the intuition really just kind of like mic drops and steps aside.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that's really helped me tune into my intuition, which was like night and day, because like our inner critic, lives in the mind.
Yes.
And our intuition lives in the body.
Yes.
So what has helped me, because we are also more so taught that listening is like head up phenomenon.
Totally.
Like from the ears and listening, and we're trying to listen to like these noises and voices. But there's been a practice that's been life-changing for me, and it's just called embodied listening. And so if you can put yourself in a nature setting and just sit still, not listen to music, like literally just let yourself hear the birds, hear the breeze, feel the grass on your feet, bring all your senses into it and listen from your body.
Yeah.
I have found that has streamlined the intuitive process, more so than just trying to sit still in like a chaotic environment, like, and just listening from my head up, like really feeling with my body and feeling like, how do I feel, and letting energies clear so that there can be more space for the intuition to speak through. And that's been a practice that has been life-changing, is like when I really know I need to make a decision, I need to get into usually nature, really connect. And then just really letting myself like be there for like 5, 15, 20 minutes, as long as I feel that like I'm one and I'm in this interconnectedness. And then from there, answers just come flooding in, and clarity. And then, like you said, it's not always comfortable. Like sometimes the mind will shoot in and be like, no, that's not really it. And you're like, no. Because like, then know that once you have that deep knowing, there is an action that you would then have to take. And that may be the scary piece. But as you said, leaning back into the trusting piece, that information came through for you for a reason. And because it's so safe, it's so soft, it's so gentle, like we can trust that. And the other thing that's really helped me intuitively was learning about my human design, and specifically my inner authority, and how do I process best, was so helpful, because I'm an emotional authority. And so that means I'm actually going to experience a lot of emotions in making decisions. So through intuitive decision making, when I'm very much a generator. So like I have energy always. Like I can be the yes man and say yes because I'm genuinely excited. But I've learned in retrospect over the years, there's been a lot of experiences where I say yes, and then there's almost like this resentment or regret because I realized I didn't actually want to do this, but I was so excited about the opportunity in the moment. But now I can't go back on my word, or I can, right? But it's always more difficult to say no after you've said yes. So I either have to just like deal with it, or just, set that boundary and just, just feel, it just feels integral for me though, because I really value my word as my bond, right? So it's like, I want to seem reliable, dependable, and I don't look that way when I'm constantly going back and forth and being somewhat indecisive. So when I learned that I'm an emotional authority, it gave me so much like reassurance, peace, and confidence in making decisions that are aligned for me, because I realized I get to give myself space to make a decision. That's actually what is going to give me the most clear decision. That's going to be the most true and aligned for me. After I clear out the highs and the lows, I'll come into a place of neutrality and then revisit the decision I have to make. And whatever, if I'm positively charged after from that neutral place, then I know it's a yes. And if I'm negatively charged from that neutral place, then I know it's a no. But that has been like so helpful for me.
Yeah. And I think too, just like in this whole conversation about like decisions, in the like trusting your intuition process, like we are going to make decisions that are, and I don't really believe in like the right or the wrong decision. It's just like everything moves us forward, but we are going to make decisions that at the end of the day, we're like, oh, so actually my gut response was the other decision, but I'm learning through this decision that, because it's like, I think that we are always kind of refining the tool of trust in the decision-making process. And it's just like taking note without being hard on ourselves, just saying, okay, that was where I like made this feel like it was intuitive and it actually wasn't. But it's like everything still moves us forward. Everything still moves us forward.
Like having that grace with yourself instead of allowing that inner critic to be like, man, you suck at following your intuition. Like, no, I'm in the process of learning how to trust myself. I'm in the process of learning how to tune into my intuition. And that's going to be making mistakes from time to time because I'm so out of tune with myself. And like giving grace to like learn this skill, because essentially it's a skill. And with every skill, like dance, I do jujitsu, but jujitsu, like there is a consistency, there's a repetition, there's a failing, there's a getting back up, there's an alignment process, like you said, and just like allow that to be the same strategy that you integrate through discovering yourself and your intuition.
Yeah, 100%. And I also wanted to like go back to embodied listening, which is such a beautiful term. And I highly agree. I feel like so many of my intuitive downloads come through when I'm doing the most mundane things, but I'm in my body. I'm not sitting. I've just gotten to a point in my practices where I can sit and like receive. Otherwise, I am usually moving and doing something where I'm not expecting a download. But since I have like practices and things that I do constantly, it comes through. But that's just like what I also want to share for people is like, there are portals everywhere. When you're in the car, when you're in the shower, like when you're doing doing the dishes, there are so many ways that things are coming to you. And that is like no surprise whatsoever, because you're kind of distracted, if you will, and you're in your body where there's enough space for something to come in. And I also want to mention, like, there are always signs around us all of the time if we choose to see them. It's kind of like, how can the universe become this place of communication? How can and not to say like make everything mean something, but like there were certain times in my life where I would hear a song and then one lyric I would hear louder. And it was like, that's not a surprise that I would hear that. Like that was a message for me. And so just allowing things to be messages for you and not a coincidence and not random, but letting like the magic of the universe support you, because there are so many things around us all of the time. Like the other day, I just realized as I was journaling, I was like, oh, that's why this kind of person continues to come back into my life right now, because, oh, that's what I'm like picking up on. That's the message I'm receiving. And just like viewing with more curiosity, like life with more curiosity and seeing how you're supported.
I love that. Curiosity, openness, receptivity. Yeah, absolutely. That's the only way for those messages to come through. And so kind of shifting into the third layer here of gifts. We talked a little bit about intuition and self-discovery, but now getting into the nitty-grittiness of like how someone can discover what their gifts are and how do you develop them once you are aware of them. Some of it might be really obvious, like maybe if you are really handsy, maybe do a crafting class or something like
Sure.
that. But anything that you have to offer on that front in regard to understanding what their gifts are,
Mhm.
because people may think that, and then maybe they immediately second guess it because they're like, well, I don't really know. I've never really explored it, or because I've been indoctrinated from a young age, I went right to corporate. Like that kind of seems weird. I don't know if that's my
Yeah.
gift. How would you kind of support someone through that?
Yeah. So I think our gifts all derive originally from our youth. So kind of what I had already touched on prior with the self-discovery piece is just starting to look there. And I also think so many people will just say, well, I was good at sports or I was good at that, but there are so many components as to why, like, and there are so many elements. So when you really sit with it, because if I were to think about dance, it's like, why did I like dance? Like, why did I love dance? Was it the performance? Was that the gift? Was it the connection to other people? Was it music? Like, there are so many components to like unpack. So going back into those things and really kind of just brainstorm mode, just kind of picking it apart and seeing what really resonates most deeply. But the two things that I think about when I think about gifts is one, ease comes to you naturally.
Mm.
And two is magnetism. Like, what do people naturally come to you for? Because I think that those are very oftentimes our gifts. Is it's just like, it's inherent, it's part of us. And if we're able to do it with ease, it feels easy breezy. Sometimes that's why people don't acknowledge that they're gifts, because it's just like second nature. Whereas like to somebody else, right? Like to me, I could get up in front of a room of 100 people and speak and not be that scared, but to somebody else, they're freaked out. And it's like, well, this is just like something that I do, but to somebody else, right? So it's like acknowledging the pieces in us that come easily and seeing them as actually a gift instead of just something we are or something we do. And then the magnetism perspective is, I think, our energy shows up in a certain way that attracts people, whether it be for inspiration, whether it be for, support, or whether it be for humor. Like there are so many things that like people naturally come to us for. So I always suggest go back to your inner child, start to explore the things that came really, really naturally to you, and then also explore what people always come to you for, because there's something in between those things that is going to show you like, oh, these are my gifts. And we've got so many. And it's just kind of a matter of how you want to express it, how you want to explore that.
Yeah, 100%. And there's, especially nowadays, with some of the jobs that like I've seen, Googling online jobs just to kind of see like just incredible jobs I have never even heard of, because people just make up jobs nowadays. So you can literally create anything from nothing.
Wow.
Anything you want to do, if you can create if you have a gift and you're like, I just want to do it in this way. Like I can't even think off the top of my head, but there's just like, just intricacies of like, and I think there are some companies that have created even positions for people who really have strong gifts and strong talents, and if they can relate it to the company as how they can help the company, I think Google does that. They've created positions or rename them to really honor that. But I mean, you can really create anything from nothing. The only thing is going to be, which actually leads to the next thing, is the fear and the criticism, especially when this is the hardest part. I think it can be easy when you have a North Star and, well, not easy, not easy at all. But when you have a North Star and you feel really clear about yourself, it's definitely easier to navigate the criticism, navigate the fear. But what makes it hard is when you just have that and you don't know how. You have zero idea how it's going to work. You have zero idea about the structure, about the process, about those next steps, but you're just like deeply trusting that clarity that you have. And that's, I think, the most challenging thing for people to navigate, because we're, again, indoctrinated into knowing the step-by-step system before taking action. If we don't know the blueprint, we're not going to take action yet. And the thing is, it's so much of the blueprint is found in the messy action.
Oh, yeah.
So there's like this double-edged sword. And then we come back to the basics of trust. You just need to trust. And then, like you said, be curious and open that every single thing that you explore, if it doesn't work out in the way that you thought, it's opening a door for a different pathway.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, it's kind of like when it comes to fear and like stepping out of your comfort zone, like messy action, 100%. Yes. And I think like needle moves, and especially like when we realize they can really be small, it's such an important thing, because I think there are so many kind of like hiding tactics that we pull out of our grab bag when we have clarity, and then we like have to do something with it and fear shows up. And I think like we get caught up between like, well, I have to do this. I have to have this before I can do that. I have to have like this certification before I can launch the business, or, I have to finish this thing before I can do that. And we like are constantly putting something in front of doing. And it's like, but what can you do with what you have right now? Because something can be done, something can be started and like gently moved with what you have right now. There is literally no excuse that can get in the way other than like, what do you have right now that could step you one step? And like, we all think about one step and like we're leaping across like 10 football yards, but it's really like the tiniest step. And I think, I always suggest this to people when we talk about like our comfort zone and where we're comfortable. And then we like step into our like stretch or expansion zone. Bring something with you from your comfort zone. Like you can step into expansion and bring something that supports you. Like, one of my clients wanted to host her first group program. And so we were kind of like working through the process. And I said, why don't you bring your girlfriends together for an evening and just like share one of your topics that you like really, really love, because you're bringing comfort with you, your friends, but you're showing up in a way that's expansive in a topic that is, this next chapter for you. So it's kind of like, where can we support ourselves with like what we know and what already feels good, but in an expansive way, so that we can kind of get used to that stretch. Because when we're used to stretching, we may not have to just like constantly bring things with us, right? We can kind of be like, oh, I got this. But I think like the first few, big steps into that expansion zone sometimes require a little assistance from your comfort zone, and that's fine.
Yes, I love that. I love that you gave people that permission, because I do feel like people experience a lot of fear for whatever reason it is. Like literally, I'm a performance coach. I do some life coach stuff when it presents. But I kind of laugh. I'm like, I'm a career coach, because there have been numerous amount of people who have joined my program for nutrition and health, and changing careers.
Totally.
Because we get into these deeper topics around like, what's the root of their fatigue? What really is fatigue? Oh, well, it's this job that like I can't stand, and it's my relationship. I have no boundaries. I don't know how to communicate. And then I've had people have divorces. I've had people with career changes, and I'm just like, oh my God, this was not my intention. And this was potentially the perfect catalyst, because as you learn more about yourself, there's going to be choices that need to be made in order for you to step into, like, if you want to step into that ultimate vitality and health and performance in your life, there's going to require changes.
Totally.
And it's not what you expect.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's so funny you say that. Like, I've had so many clients come to me for something and then like realize something else. And you're just like, okay, well, that's what needed to happen in this experience. But I think what's really important when we think about fear, because I believe there's like two sides of fear. There's like the projected fear that is like rooted from the worry and the ego. And then there's like the expanded fear that is like, I'm like so scared, but like excited to do this. Because like fear is always around. And so it's just kind of like two categories. But when I think about like that more like ego-based projected fear, it kind of comes into this, like, what's the worst case scenario? Like this could happen, this could happen. And I'm always like, explore that. What would happen if that, explore that. What if that happened? And what if that happened? And what if that happened? What would you do? Because then it almost just like puts a period on the worry. Right. It's like, okay, so if I were to leave my job, let's say that's like an example. What if you were to leave your job? Like, I'm afraid to leave my job. What if I have no money? Okay. What if you did leave your job? What if you did have no money? What would you do? And like really inquiring to the person, like, what would you do if you were in that situation? And it just starts to shift from this spiral to this like empowerment.
Yeah.
And it always comes back to a place of, I would figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. So taking the fear and landing it through exploring like really the what if. And at the end of the day, I always say the opposite of fear is love. Yeah. And so if we can combat our fear with like why in the first place, what are you looking for? Like for this example of leaving the job, what are you really looking for? I'm looking for fulfillment and satisfaction and all of this stuff. And so it's like, that is why you want to do this.
Yeah. Having that intrinsic motivator for sure.
Absolutely.
I love that. And you've offered so much advice and tips, but I guess from a basic standpoint, do you have any just general advice of what you would offer someone looking to step into this journey? And is there perhaps anything that you know now that you wish you knew back then? Woulda, shoulda, coulda, but now we have the wisdom and experience.
Yeah. So wise. Yeah, honestly, like that your life path and the way that you work and the way that you make decisions is going to look different than most people around you. Because what I witnessed is like, you know, even as I've been in self-discovery and absorbing all of the information, there's also a lot of comparison inside of this industry. Like once you're like a conscious, you know, personal growth prioritized person, there's also like, oh, well, that style worked for somebody else. Why isn't it working for me? There's a lot of different ways to do this work. There's a lot of different ways to express yourself, and just remembering that everything out there is an option. It's a suggestion, and that your inner compass is the most important thing. You can absorb information, but then sit with it. Just because somebody else is saying it, notice how it's landing for you. Coming back to that like energetic discernment, because there's so much information and some of it, you know, could be true, could be false for you or not.
Yeah.
And so really paying attention to, number one, what you're consuming and making sure that it's actually benefiting you, and knowing where, you know, you're putting the, like the leadership role in the person that's teaching it to you versus yourself. And I would also just say, like, yes, absorb information, but also don't. There's so much to be done in the sitting and the witnessing and the feeling. And so like really balancing out consumption of information and introspection and like the witness, because there's a lot out there. And so always coming back to the self and discerning.
Yeah. And I don't know how hand in hand this goes, but like when you said that consuming piece, what stood out to me, which is something I'm constantly auditing within myself, is balancing out like consuming and creating.
Yes.
Like when we're consuming, our energy is going outward.
Yeah.
Or we're bringing energy in. We're bringing in when we're consuming. We're taking it in. And I want you to think of like, you know, like a gutter with leaves. It just keeps getting filled and there's no spaciousness for anything else to come through for your own stuff. So I think balancing out the consuming, so learning, but not getting into the trap of constantly learning, right? Like constantly learning, constantly doing certifications, constantly doing that. I was in that for a little bit.
Same.
And then at some point I kind of got not burnt out, but kind of got to that space of like, well, why isn't it working? And then I realized, oh, Natalie, you haven't really integrated and embodied any of it because you're too busy bringing more information in. So let's work with what you have. Let's distill everything that you've learned and invested in, and let's go back to zero and just start and really integrate, really embody piece by piece.
Yeah.
And then start acting from that and allowing yourself to fail and make mistakes along the way and learn, and just start creating and not just falling into that consumption piece. Because like you said, that will absolutely lead to procrastination in taking action towards something. Because we're just like, oh, well, I need to do this cert and then this cert and then level 3, level 5. And then I'll finally feel ready, which is interesting because the quote I like to say is that ready is not a feeling, it's a decision. And that's something I really kind of take to heart a lot, because we always fall into this trap of like, when I feel ready to do this, then I'll do it. It's like, it's not a feeling, it's a decision.
Yeah.
You know,
so
never feel ready.
No, truly. It's the choice to do something. Truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's more confidence when you understand yourself, when you understand your gifts. I think it definitely breeds a little bit more confidence in taking those actions when you have that clarity of self, because otherwise it is really scary to just take a a career change or to make a complete different shift and not know yourself at all in that process, well, then, yeah, it's going to be extremely scary. So you almost want to set yourself up for success a little bit, by understanding yourself and uncovering, because like you said, that worry question that we can dive deeper and deeper to unravel. I think that also points back to what you were saying, is like when you understand yourself and you understand that you can trust your intuition and that you know what your gifts are, that's what you can utilize at the bottom of the barrel when you say, what if I lose my job? What if everything falls to shit? It's like, well, you have these innate gifts available to you. So maybe it's the universe. If that does happen, even if it does happen, I guarantee it probably won't. But even if it won't, you literally have innate gifts that you cannot lose. They are a part of you. And then that's your universe calling to put them to action, and that's what sometimes we call the rock bottom. Sometimes we have to hit rock bottom. And that's a lot of times where people have those awakenings, it's like that rock bottom period, but then we find that alignment the hard way, but it doesn't always have to be the hard way.
Right. Well, because so much of our biggest transformation does happen through the action process, and not like the surface action process we were talking about at the beginning, but from like making the decisions that we're making and like being in the co-creation with the universe and like, okay, this decision happened and now I have to show up in this new way, or I have to bring out this gift. And it's like, that's why those needle moves or these decisions and like really practicing it small scale before taking it big scale are so helpful, because we learn so much through doing, because it's embodiment, it's in the body. And I think, when we bring it back to what you were saying about the visual component, earlier in this chat, I also think like visualization is so important too, is just like visualizing yourself doing these things so that you have a familiarity with it in your body, in your mind. And so that when you like are in that space, you can kind of tap into that same wisdom or that same frequency and just be like, okay, how can I approach this from that place?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. One of the things that's really helped me was, and this gave me such a big point of awareness about myself, and it was something I adopted from childhood. I was modeled a lack of decisiveness and constant vacillation between like saying they're going to do something, doing something else. And that was the only consistent thing in my childhood, was the inconsistent behaviors and actions and all of that. And when it came to making big decisions or business decisions, I could not bring myself, before understanding intuitive decision making, like to make a decision. Like I literally would just prolong the decision. Like I just could not. It was so much anxiety to just put a period on the decision. And when I really explored that, I found out more about the childhood piece, and I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. But to really start realizing that if I continue down this path, it's just going to be utter self-sabotage for the rest of my life. So how can I work with my nervous system and that safe zone, like you said, slowly build this skill that's so incredibly important for business, is to be decisive. And so I started with the small things. I started with really asking myself, like, when I want to eat, like you said, start small, move the needle forward. To me, that was like an important, hugely important decision-making process of like, just pick what you want on the menu.
Yes.
Thinking 20 times, 20 minutes to make a decision. Like I kind of adopted something I call like choice minimalism. I read it in a book a long time ago and I loved it. It's like choice minimalism. Don't give yourself a lot of decisions. You have this and you have to make it, and just make it. And so I've been doing that with just, what was I wearing? Like what shirt do I want to wear today? This or this, period. Make it and move on. And like fully building my capacity to do that expanded my capacity to be able to make bigger decisions in my life, like career changes or a business decision of launching a program, those are really scary, and if you can't make a decision when you wake up what you're going to eat for breakfast, well, of course you're not going to make a business decision. And that was a big reality check for me. And I was like, okay, so I need to start way back, start small, and start building this confidence in making decisions. And then it became easier to make business decisions.
Oh yeah. And that's so beautiful, because I feel the same way about like consistency. I have been like getting in the habit of making my bed the second I step out of the bed, and not like going into the bathroom first. I'm like, no, the second I step my foot off the bed, I am making my bed, because it's one anchor into me being more consistent in bigger things that I want to stay consistent with. But again, it's just like kind of going back to the whole thing of like, the life is our playground. There's always things here to support us that we really don't have to go that far to see and to like utilize. And so what is that one thing that you already do in your day-to-day life? For you, it's like the choice. For me, it's the consistency that can support you in this connection to where you're really wanting to go, and what you have clarity on so far.
Yeah, I love that so much. So good. So how would anybody be able to connect with you? What's the best way to connect with you? If you have anything that you're offering right now, what's the best way to work with you? And obviously everything will be in the show notes for people to connect. But if there's anything in your world right now that's swirling around that you'd like to pitch, it's open.
Love it. So I'm pretty active on the gram. So at Nikki Norenberg is where I usually live. Otherwise, my website's also www.nikkinorenberg.com. I'm kind of transitioning between a few projects right now, but just like things that are always available in my world. Activation sessions are really cool. It's a one-time session, and it's an intuitive and coaching fusion. So I'm essentially connecting into your chakras, your energy body, and it's a lot around clarity and purpose. So I get to see messages for each chakra and really guide forward what's coming through. And then also with my coaching background, I support you in that. So there's actually some sort of integration process and activation plan. So we're not just leaving with, okay, yeah, but now what? It's like, this is what came through, and this is the support that you can start to implement and integrate. So those are super fun. They're just a great check-in with the self. If you're feeling just a little stuck, it's like a great way to just like drop in, get clear, and move forward. And then of course, always doing one-on-one coaching and mentorship, which is a deeper commitment, but I always suggest starting honestly with the activation sessions first.
Yeah. And how long do they normally run?
Hour.
Okay. And
yeah.
Zoom?
Yeah, on Zoom, you get a full recording. I do a full 45-minute meditation prior to the session. So I come like fully prepared, locked and loaded with notes.
Amazing. So good.
Yeah.
Go check that out. I will put, as I said, everything to connect with Nikki in the show notes. If you guys took anything away from this episode, as always, I'd love for you to share it on Instagram. You could tag Nikki, tag us at Body by Boss LLC. We'd love to share any insights that you had or any takeaways. And if you want to take it a step further into personal discovery, then reach out to Nikki. She's a beautiful light. I know that you can feel her energy, and trust yourself if this feels aligned. We will see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Nikki, for being here.
Ooh, thanks for having me.